Li Teho stood in the center of the massive chamber, feeling very small. The walls stretched up so high he could not see the ceiling. Strange lights floated in the air around him, casting moving shadows on the floor. He had practiced this moment for months, but now his hands shook as he held the datapad containing Earth's application. The Galactic Council sat in a circle around him. 12 different alien species, each more ancient than human civilization. Their bodies were nothing like humans. Some looked like giant insects with too many arms. Others were made of what seemed like living crystal that changed colors as they moved. A few appeared to be clouds of gas held together by invisible forces. At the front sat Zixnara of the Velthari Empire. Her people were the oldest in the galaxy. She looked like a tall, thin tree with bark that moved like skin. Her voice came from somewhere inside her trunk, deep and hollow like wind through caves. "So," Zixnara said, her words echoing in the vast space. "The humans wish to join our council." Teho cleared his throat. "Yes, honored speaker. Earth has prepared a complete application showing our technological achievements and our desire for peaceful cooperation with all galactic species." A sound filled the chamber. It took Teho a moment to realize what it was. Laughter. The council members were laughing at him. The Kethmori representative, who looked like a giant spider made of metal, clicked his mandibles in amusement. "Peaceful cooperation? Your species has been in space for less than 100 of your years. We have been traveling between stars for over 100,000 years. Tell us about these achievements," said another council member, her voice dripping with fake interest. She was from the Zephyrian Collective, her body a swirling mass of purple gas with glowing eyes floating inside. "We are so very curious about what you primitive mammals have accomplished." Teho felt his face grow hot, but he kept his voice steady. "We have developed fusion power that can provide clean energy for our entire planet. Our quantum computers can solve problems that would take older systems thousands of years. We have built ships that can travel faster than light and have established colonies on 17 worlds." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Zixnara's bark-like skin rippled in what might have been amusement. "Fusion power? How adorable. We learned to harness the energy of entire stars before your species discovered fire. Quantum computers? Quaint toys compared to the living machines that run our civilizations. And 17 colonies? Child, some of us have settled more worlds than your species has words." Dr. Park Min-soo stepped forward from where she had been waiting. She was Earth's best expert on alien life and had studied every known species for decades. "Honored Council, if I may speak. Humanity may be young, but we have unique qualities that could benefit the galactic community. Our ability to adapt and solve problems in new ways has allowed us to survive and thrive on our challenging world." The spider-like Kethmori made a dismissive gesture with one of his metal arms. "Unique qualities? Every young species believes they are special. You think your brief existence gives you wisdom that our millions of years of experience do not? We have studied your history," added a member from the Altarian Union, whose body seemed to be made of living liquid that constantly changed shape. "Your species is violent and aggressive. You fight wars over resources that could easily be shared. You destroy your own environment for short-term gains. Why should we trust such creatures with the responsibilities of council membership?" Teho felt his hope slipping away. "We have learned from our mistakes. We have ended wars and begun healing our world. We seek only to learn from older, wiser civilizations and contribute what we can to the greater good of all species." Zixnara raised one of her branch-like arms, and the chamber fell silent. "The council has made its decision. Humanity's application for membership is rejected." The words hit Teho like a physical blow. He had known this might happen, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that planning could not prepare him for. "However," Zixnara continued, "we are not without mercy. We grant humanity provisional observation status. You may observe council proceedings and learn from our wisdom. Perhaps in 10,000 of your years, when you have matured beyond your warlike tendencies and achieved actual civilization, you may apply again." 10,000 years, longer than all of recorded human history. Taeho realized they were not just being rejected. They were being dismissed as children who might someday maybe be worthy of notice. The council members began to disperse, their forms floating, walking, or sliding toward various exits. None of them looked back at the human delegation. To them, this meeting was already forgotten, a minor interruption in their important business of running the galaxy. Dr. Park moved to stand beside Taeho. Her face was calm, but he could see anger, burning in her eyes. "Well," she said quietly, "that went about as well as we expected." "Did it?" Taeho asked. "I thought maybe if we could show them what we're capable of." "They don't want to see what we're capable of," Park said. "They want us to be impressed by what they're capable of. They want us to spend 10,000 years trying to become like them." Captain Kim Da-woon approached from where he had been standing guard near the entrance. His military uniform looked plain and simple compared to the exotic technologies and strange forms they had just witnessed. "The ship is ready to depart when you are, Ambassador." As they walked toward the exit, Da-woon pulled out a small device and frowned at its readings. "Ma'am, I'm picking up some unusual sensor data. The deep space scans are showing, well, they're showing nothing at all in certain sectors." "Nothing?" Park asked, suddenly interested despite their recent humiliation. "Empty space, but not normal empty space. Areas where even background radiation seems to be wrong somehow. The computer can't make sense of the readings." Taeho looked back at the now empty council chamber. "Did you mention this in the briefings?" "No, sir. It seemed like a minor technical issue, probably just interference from all the advanced technology on this station." Park was still staring at the device. "Can you show me the data when we get back to the ship?" "Of course, Doctor." As they left the council station, none of them knew. They had just taken the first step toward a discovery that would change everything. The council had laughed at humanity's application, dismissing them as young and primitive. But in the dark spaces between the stars, ancient things waited patiently for the one species foolish enough or brave enough to look where others feared to go. The void had been quiet for millions of years. Soon, it would have reason to scream. Dr. Choi Hyejin stared at the star charts floating in front of her, but her mind was elsewhere. 6 months had passed since the Council's rejection, and Earth's governments were still arguing about what to do next. Some wanted to wait the 10,000 years and try to prove humanity worthy. Others wanted to ignore the Council entirely and focus on expanding human territory. Choi had a different idea. "Look at these empty zones," she said to the small group gathered in her laboratory. "The Council species avoid them completely. No trade routes, no colonies, no exploration. They pretend these areas don't exist." Commander Yoon Jae-min leaned over the holographic display. He was a military pilot, but unlike most soldiers, he was curious about the unknown rather than afraid of it. "Maybe there's a good reason they stay away. Could be dangerous." "Everything worth doing is dangerous," said Songnari from across the room. The young engineer was working on modifications to their ship's engines. "If we only went places that were safe, we'd still be living in caves." Lim Seok-jun looked up from cleaning his weapons. The security specialist didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. "The question isn't whether it's dangerous, the question is whether it's worth the risk." Dr. Kang Soo-young spread out her research materials on the table. As humanity's leading expert on ancient civilizations, she had been studying every scrap of information about the galaxy's history. "I've been analyzing Council historical records. These empty zones have been avoided for as long as records exist. But here's the interesting part. There are references to the quiet spaces and where the first builders went to rest in their oldest documents." "First builders?" Choi asked. "Someone was here before the Council species. Someone old enough that even the Velthari consider them ancient history. But all references to them stop suddenly about 3 million years ago. No explanation, no gradual decline. They were there, and then they weren't." Yoon studied the star charts more carefully. "These empty zones are positioned strategically. If I were designing a defensive network, I might put installations in places, like this." "Defensive network against what?" Song asked. That's what we need to find out, Choi said. I've been working on this proposal for weeks, the Void Initiative. While the council species sit in their comfortable bubbles ignoring whole sections of the galaxy, we go see what they're so afraid of. Lim finished reassembling his plasma rifle. And if we find something that wants to kill us, then we learn something new about the universe before we die, Choi replied with a grin that made the others wonder if she was joking. 3 weeks later, their ship Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of null space. The Yao name had been Yoon's choice. After the council's rejection, he thought it was appropriate. Sensor readings are unusual, Song reported from the engineering station. Space here doesn't behave the way it should. The laws of physics seem to be more like suggestions. On the main screen, they could see nothing but empty blackness. No stars, no planets, no asteroids. But the sensors were detecting something. There, Kang said, pointing to a blip on the display. That structure, it's artificial. Yoon adjusted their course toward the object. As they got closer, they could see it was massive, easily the size of a small moon. But its shape made no sense. It seemed to twist and fold back on itself with angles that hurt to look at directly. My eyes keep trying to focus on it, but they can't, Song said, rubbing her temples. It's like my brain doesn't know how to process what it's seeing. Take us in closer, Choi ordered. But slowly. We don't know what we're dealing with. As Defiance approached the structure, more details became visible. The surface was covered in patterns that seemed to move when nobody was looking directly at them. Strange symbols were carved deep into what looked like black metal, but the metal reflected no light. I'm detecting power sources, Song reported. Lots of them. This thing is still active after who knows how many years. Lim was running security scans. No weapon signatures that I can identify. But then again, if this technology is as old as we think it is, our sensors might not recognize advanced weapons anyway. Kang was taking detailed scans of the symbols and patterns. These markings, they're not like anything in the council databases, but there's something familiar about them, like a half-remembered dream. They spent hours studying the structure from the outside, taking every measurement they could without actually boarding it. When they finally returned to normal space, they had more questions than answers. It's definitely artificial, Choi said as they reviewed their data. But it wasn't built by any species we know about. The technology is so advanced that our computers can barely analyze it. Could it be a weapon? Yoon asked. Maybe. But if it is, it's not pointed at anything we can detect. The energy patterns suggest it might be some kind of containment system. Containing what? Song wondered aloud. Over the following weeks, they found more structures, dozens of them, scattered throughout the empty zones, all different in shape and size, but all sharing the same impossible geometry and ancient technology. Some were clearly damaged, with pieces floating nearby like the remains of a cosmic battle. I think we're looking at the remnants of a civilization, Kang said during one of their briefings. Not just any civilization, one that was more advanced than even the council species, and something happened to them. Something bad, Lim added, studying tactical displays of the damaged structures. Choi nodded. The question is, what could destroy beings this advanced? And where is it now? During their 5th expedition into null space, they got their first real clue. Song was analyzing energy patterns from one of the intact structures when her instruments detected something new. There's another power source nearby, she reported. But this one is different. Smaller, but much more active. They found it floating alone in the darkness, a crystalline object about the size of a person. Unlike the other structures, this one was beautiful rather than disturbing. It pulsed with soft, warm light that seemed almost alive. It's trying to communicate, Kang said excitedly, watching the patterns in the light. The pulses aren't random, they're mathematical sequences. Choi made a decision that would change everything. Bring it aboard, carefully. Ma'am, Lim protested. That could be extremely dangerous. Everything we've done so far has been dangerous. But if we're going to understand what happened here, we need to take some risks. They used the ship's cargo bay as a containment area, surrounding the crystal with every sensor and safety device they had. For days, nothing happened. The crystal just floated there, pulsing with its gentle light. Then, on the fourth day, it spoke, not in words but directly into their minds. Images flooded their consciousness, vast cities between the stars, beings of incredible beauty and power, and something else. Something dark and hungry that came from spaces that shouldn't exist. The crystal was trying to warn them about what was coming, about what the ancient builders had sacrificed everything to stop, and about why humanity was the only species that could continue their work. When the visions ended, the 5 humans looked at each other with new understanding. They had come looking for answers about empty space. Instead, they had found the most important secret in the galaxy. The void wasn't empty at all. It was guarded. And the guards were failing. Major An Gildong didn't believe in ghosts, but the empty corridors of the ancient station made him reconsider. His boots echoed on floors that had known no footsteps for millions of years. The air was breathable, somehow maintained by systems that defied human understanding. "Sir," called Corporal Beck from up ahead, "you need to see this." An moved carefully through the twisted hallways of what Dr. Choi's team had started calling an architect facility. 3 months had passed since the discovery of the crystal artifact, and humanity had launched a dozen expeditions into null space. Each one found more evidence of the vanished civilization. The room Bayek had discovered was enormous, its walls covered in the same impossible patterns they had seen on the external structures. But in the center stood something new, a column of pure energy that reached from floor to ceiling, contained within a field that bent light around itself. Motion sensors detect movement inside the energy field, reported Specialist Lee from her position near the entrance. But it's not random. Whatever's in there is alive and aware. Dr. Johnhua Young approached with her scanning equipment. The quantum physicist had joined the military expedition specifically to study architect technology. The energy readings are incredible. This containment system is more advanced than anything in our theoretical models. Containing what, exactly? An asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. John's instruments gave her information that made her face go pale. Something that exists in more dimensions than our reality can support. If this containment field failed, she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. They had found dozens of similar facilities throughout the null zones. All active, all containing something that the ancient architects had deemed too dangerous to allow free. The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't just a defensive network, it was a prison system on a galactic scale. Back on Earth, Professor Nam In-soo worked 18 hours a day trying to decode the mathematical messages that architect technology sent to human minds. Unlike the other council species, humans seemed uniquely able to understand the ancient communications. The messages were becoming clearer each day, and the story they told was terrifying. The architects called them the Hungry Dark, Nam explained, to a gathering of Earth's top scientists and military leaders. Entities that exist in the spaces between dimensions. They don't follow our laws of physics because they come from places where those laws don't exist. Admiral Bae Sung-ho leaned forward in his chair. "Are you saying these things are still alive after 3 million years?" "Time doesn't affect them the way it affects us," Nam replied. "From what I can understand of the messages, they're not really alive or dead in any sense we would recognize. They simply are, and they want to make everything else like them." Dr. Choi's voice came through the communication system from her research ship in null space. "Admiral, we've found something you need to know about. The containment systems are failing." The room fell silent. Everyone had feared this moment since the first architect facility was discovered. "How long do we have?" Bae asked. "Based on the deterioration patterns, maybe 50 years before the first major breach. Maybe less if something accelerates the breakdown." "And if these entities escape?" Nam answered before Choi could respond. "According to the architect records, they don't destroy matter in the conventional sense. They change it. They make it follow their reality instead of ours. Space becomes fluid. Time becomes optional. Physics becomes whatever they want it to be." The implications hit everyone at once. The council species had been living safely for millions of years, protected by barriers they never knew existed. If those barriers failed, The entire galaxy would be transformed into something unrecognizable. There's more, Choi continued from her distant ship. The architect technology responds to human neural patterns in ways it doesn't respond to other species. We've tested this with Council species volunteers. Their minds are too structured, too logical. The technology needs the chaos and creativity of human thought to function properly. Admiral Bay stood up, his mind already working through the tactical implications. Are you telling me that humanity is the only species that can maintain these containment systems? That's exactly what I'm telling you, sir. The architects somehow knew we would eventually find them. They designed their technology to work with minds like ours. In the depths of null space, Commander Oh Dong-hyun was experiencing this truth firsthand aboard his scout ship Prometheus. His crew had been working with a small architect facility when something went wrong. The containment field flickered, and for just a moment reality shifted. Engineer Ryu Soo-jin saw her hands become transparent as space-time rippled around them. The corridor stretched and compressed like rubber, with doors leading to rooms that couldn't possibly fit inside the ship. Through the walls, she could see things moving that her eyes refused to focus on. "Emergency protocols," Oh shouted, but his voice echoed from directions that didn't exist. "Activate the human-modified controls," Soo-jin reached for the jury-rigged panel they had installed using hybrid human architect technology. The moment her hands touched the controls, reality snapped back into its proper shape. The impossible visions vanished, leaving only the normal corridors of their ship. "What just happened?" asked Navigation Officer Park from the bridge, his voice shaking. "We just saw what the galaxy will look like if the containment systems fail completely," Oh replied grimly. Dr. Yang Kyung-ho studied the incident reports from his research station. As one of humanity's leading experts on dimensional physics, he was trying to understand how the architect technology actually worked. The answer, when it finally came to him, was both elegant and horrifying. The architects hadn't just built containment systems. They had restructured local spacetime to create pockets of reality that were incompatible with the hungry dark. But maintaining this required constant input from minds that could think in contradictory ways, minds that could accept that something could be both true and false at the same time. Human minds. The other council species had evolved beyond such chaotic thinking. Their civilizations were built on logic, consistency, and order. These were strengths in most circumstances, but fatal weaknesses when dealing with entities that existed outside normal reality. Meanwhile, in the council chambers, reports of strange incidents were beginning to filter in from outer colonies, ships disappearing in flashes of impossible light, planets where the laws of physics seemed to be malfunctioning, reality storms that left behind areas where matter behaved like liquid and time flowed backward. The council members dismissed these reports as exaggerations or equipment failures. Some suggested that human presence in the null zones was causing the problems. A few even proposed restricting humanity's space travel to prevent further contamination of stable space. None of them realized that the barriers protecting their civilization were crumbling, maintained only by the desperate efforts of the species they had rejected as primitive. In null space, Major On's team made one final discovery that changed everything. Deep within the largest architect facility they had found, past layer upon layer of containment systems, they found a chamber that hurt to look at. The walls seemed to bend inward and outward at the same time, and the air itself felt thick with wrongness. In the center of the chamber was a message, written in human mathematical symbols despite being millions of years old. "To those who come after," the message read, "we have held the gates as long as we could. The hungry dark sleeps, but does not die. When our strength fails, you must take up the watch. Guard the barriers, children of chaos. Guard them well, for all reality depends upon it." The message was signed with a symbol that made On's head spin, a representation of infinity folded back upon itself, simultaneously ending and beginning. The architects hadn't vanished. They had transformed themselves into the very barriers that held back the dark, sacrificing their existence to give the galaxy millions of years of safety. Now that safety was ending, and humanity was the only species capable of taking up the burden. The question was whether they were strong enough to bear it, and whether the rest of the galaxy would let them try before it was too late. The first major breach happened on a Tuesday. Captain Oh Dong-hyun was eating breakfast in his ship's small dining area when reality tore open beside his coffee cup. The tear was small at first, no bigger than his thumb, but through it he could see something that made his mind recoil. Impossible colors that had no names, spaces that folded back on themselves, and movement that suggested intelligence but no form he could comprehend. "Su-jin," he shouted to the engineering section. "Emergency. Activation of containment protocols." Engineer Ryu Su-jin was already moving, her hands flying over the human-modified architect controls they had installed throughout the ship. The technology responded to her thoughts as much as her touch, reading the chaos in her mind and translating it into commands the ancient systems could understand. The tear sealed itself, but not before something had pushed partway through. Oh stared at the spot where reality had been damaged. The air still looked wrong there, like looking through water that wasn't quite transparent. "Sir," Su-jin called from the engineering bay, "I'm reading cascade failures throughout the entire sector. Whatever caused that breach is spreading." On the bridge, their sensors showed a nightmare. Space itself was coming apart in a growing sphere. Around them, stars were changing color, their light bending in directions that didn't exist. 3 nearby planets had simply vanished, leaving behind voids that hurt to observe. "All ships, this is Prometheus." Oh broadcast on emergency channels. "We have a major containment failure in Sector 779. Recommend immediate evacuation of all Council species vessels. Human ships with modified technology, please respond for emergency assistance." The response was immediate but chaotic. 6 human ships altered course toward the disaster zone, while dozens of Council species vessels fled in the opposite direction. The humans had been working with architect technology for months now, jury-rigging their ships and stations with hybrid systems that could interact with the ancient controls. The Council species couldn't even see the modifications. To their logical, ordered minds, the human additions looked like random junk attached to their ships with no purpose or function. Dr. Yang Kyung-ho watched the crisis unfold from his research station Archimedes. His team had been monitoring the barrier network for weeks, watching as failure points spread like cracks in ice. The mathematics were beautiful and terrifying. Each breach made the next one more likely, creating a cascade that would eventually consume the galaxy. "We need more ships," he told Admiral Bay through the communication system. "Every human vessel we can modify with architect technology. The barriers are failing faster than we can repair them." "How many do you need?" Bay asked. "All of them, sir. Every ship, every station, every human in space. And it still might not be enough." In the council chambers, emergency sessions were being called as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Entire systems were reporting reality distortions. Planets where gravity flowed upward, stars that burned with cold fire, space stations that existed in more dimensions than their hulls could contain. Counselor Velthun of the Keth Mori was one of the few who suspected the truth. His species had the longest historical records, and deep in their archives were references to the quiet times when the galaxy was protected by forces beyond understanding. "The humans know something," he told the emergency assembly. "Their ships are the only ones that can operate near these distortions. They've discovered technology we don't understand." "Impossible," scoffed Zix Nara. "They're barely out of their system. What could they know that we do not?" The answer came in the form of a transmission from Captain O's ship, broadcast to every receiving station in the galaxy. His image appeared on screens throughout Council space, showing the interior of Prometheus as reality warped around it. "This is Captain Oh Dong-hyun of the human vessel Prometheus," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos visible behind him. "We are transmitting on all frequencies with critical information about the ongoing reality distortions." The transmission showed the containment breach from his ship's sensors, but more importantly, it showed the human response. Su-jin worked at controls that seemed to be part machine and part living organism, her hands moving in patterns that followed No logical sequence, but somehow maintained the barrier between normal space and whatever was trying to push through. For millions of years, this galaxy has been protected by containment systems built by an ancient civilization. Those systems are now failing. Only human minds can interface with the technology needed to maintain them. We are requesting immediate cooperation from all council species to coordinate repair efforts. The transmission ended with Sujin successfully sealing another reality breach, but not before everyone watching had seen what lay beyond. Spaces where the laws of physics were suggestions and entities that existed in ways no sane mind should contemplate. In the council chambers, silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, a junior member from the Altarian Union spoke. If this is true, then we owe these humans an apology. Apology? Zixnara's bark-like skin rippled with agitation. They're clearly using some kind of illusion technology to make themselves seem important. This is all an elaborate deception to gain membership in the council. But Councillor Velthun was studying data streams from across the galaxy. The pattern was undeniable. Wherever human ships were present, the reality distortions could be contained. Where only council species were available, entire systems were being consumed by impossible geometries. Pride comes before the fall, he said quietly, using an ancient Kethmori proverb. We have built our civilization on foundations we did not, lay protected by guardians we never thanked. Now those guardians are gone and only the children we rejected can take their place. On the outer rim, Lieutenant Shin Woo-jin piloted his fighter through space that behaved more like thick liquid than vacuum. His ship was small, barely large enough for one person, but every surface was covered with human-modified architect technology. The controls responded to his thoughts, his emotions, his dreams. He was hunting something that shouldn't exist, a fragment of the hungry dark that had broken through during the latest breach. It moved through space like a living shadow, changing reality around it as it went. Where it passed, matter became probability and time flowed in loops. This is Hunter 7, he reported to the coordination center. I have visual contact with the target, beginning engagement. The engagement wasn't fought with weapons in any traditional sense. Instead, Shin used his ship's modified systems to project human concepts of reality at the entity. Images of linear time, consistent physics, matter that stayed in one state. The clash between ordered human thought and chaotic alien existence created fireworks that could be seen from light years away. When it was over, the entity had been forced back into its dimensional prison, but Shin's ship was changed. Parts of it now existed slightly outside normal space-time, and his instruments showed readings that would drive council scientists insane. Hunter 7 to base, he reported. Target contained, but I don't think I can return to normal space. My ship is too far modified now. I'll have to stay out here and keep hunting. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Human pilots, engineers, and scientists were sacrificing their ability to exist in normal reality in order to maintain the barriers that protected everyone else. They were becoming like the architects, guardians who stood between the galaxy and the dark spaces beyond. The council species watched in growing horror as they realized what was happening. The humans weren't just fighting the reality distortions, they were becoming part of the containment system itself, transforming their minds and bodies to interface with technology that no logical species could operate. We must help them, Velthun declared in the council chambers. Help them do what? Asked the Zephyrian representative. We can't even see most of their modifications, let alone understand them. Then we must do what we can, Velthun replied. Provide resources, ship hulls, raw materials. Let them modify our vessels if needed. You're talking about giving control of our fleet to a species we rejected 6 months ago, Zixnara protested. I'm talking about giving them the tools to save us all, Velthun shot back. Because if they fail, there won't be a council to debate the wisdom of our choices. In null space, the human crews working to maintain the barriers heard the first signs that the council was beginning to understand. Supply ships arrived carrying materials they needed. Volunteer crews from various species came to assist with tasks that didn't require interfacing with architect technology, but it was too little, too late. The cascade failures were accelerating and humanity didn't have enough people to cover all the breach points. Worse, each human who worked with the ancient technology paid a price. They became less able to exist in normal reality and more adapted to the strange spaces between dimensions. The galaxy was being saved, but the cost was higher than anyone had imagined, and in the deepest parts of null space something vast and patient had begun to take notice of the beings who dared to stand in its way. The void was about to scream. The delegation from the Galactic Council arrived at Earth on a Thursday, 3 months after the reality storms had consumed 17 star systems. Ambassador Velthun led the group, his metal spider-like form moving carefully through the corridors of the human government building. Behind him walked representatives from 8 other council species, their previous arrogance replaced by desperate need. President Han Un-seo sat behind her desk, watching the aliens who had once dismissed her species as primitive children. Her hair had gone white in the past year, from the stress of coordinating humanity's response to the galactic crisis. Around her stood the human leaders who had guided the barrier restoration efforts, Admiral Bae Sung-ho, Dr. Choi Hae-jin, and Fleet Admiral Park Ji-hoon. Honored President, Velthun began, his mechanical voice carrying undertones of shame. We come before humanity to request assistance in the current crisis. Han's expression remained neutral. The same humanity you rejected from council membership? The same species you called too primitive and aggressive for galactic civilization? The Zephyrian representative, her gas form rippling with distress, spoke up. We were wrong. We see that now. Your species has capabilities we never imagined. Our capabilities haven't changed since you laughed us out of your council chambers, Admiral Bae said coldly. We've simply been willing to use them where others would not go. Dr. Choi leaned forward in her chair. We've lost over 3,000 people maintaining your barrier systems. They can't return to normal space because their minds have been modified by architect technology. They're living in dimensions that would drive your species insane just to keep the rest of us safe. Velthun's metal claws clicked against the floor. We know the price your people are paying. We have prepared compensation packages, territorial grants, technology shares. You think this is about payment? Fleet Admiral Park stood up, his uniform bearing the insignia of the new Void Fleet, humanity's military force dedicated to fighting in null space. Our people aren't dying for money or territory. They're dying because someone has to hold the line and you can't. The room fell silent. Through the windows they could see the launch trails of human ships departing for null space. Volunteers, who knew they would never return to Earth, never again exist fully in normal reality. President Han finally spoke. The Galactic Council offered humanity membership after 10,000 years of proving ourselves worthy. We're prepared to offer the Council something different. What do you mean? Asked the Altarian representative. Immediate membership and full voting rights, Han said. Not in 10,000 years. Today. Along with human leadership of all barrier maintenance operations and unrestricted access to Council resources and territory. Velthun's optical sensors focused on her. Those are significant demands. Those are the terms, Admiral Bae stated flatly. Your choice is simple. Accept human leadership in the areas where you cannot function, or watch reality collapse around your ancient civilizations. The Council delegation requested time to consider the offer. While they deliberated, the crisis continued to worsen. Commander Lee Da-sam piloted her modified ship through a region of space where time flowed backward and gravity pointed in 17 different directions simultaneously. Her vessel existed partially outside normal physics, making it capable of operating in areas that would tear apart conventional ships. Void Control, this is Shepard 9, she reported to the command center floating in null space. I've got visual on the primary breach. It's big. The breach was more than big. It was a wound in reality itself, stretching across several light years. Through it, the hungry dark pressed against the barriers that had contained it for millions of years. The entities within were unlike anything in normal space. Forms that existed in too many dimensions, thoughts that could reshape matter, hungers that consumed the concept of existence itself. Lee's instruments, modified with architect technology, and guided by human intuition, showed her the weak points in the barrier network, Each one had to be reinforced manually, requiring a human mind to interface with systems that operated on principles no other species could comprehend. "Beginning stabilization procedures," she announced, her hands moving over controls that were part machine, part living organism, and part pure mathematics given physical form. The work was dangerous beyond description. Each time she interfaced with the architect systems, part of her consciousness spread into dimensions that human language couldn't describe. She was becoming less human and more something else, a hybrid being capable of thinking in ways that spanned multiple realities simultaneously. Lieutenant Shin Woo-jin, now permanently stationed in null space after his ship had become too modified to exist in normal reality, received her status reports with understanding that came from shared sacrifice. His own transformation was further advanced. He could see through the barriers into the spaces beyond, where the hungry dark waited with patient malevolence. "The primary breach is stabilizing," he reported to Fleet Admiral Park through communication systems that transmitted thoughts as much as words. "But we're going to need more people. The cascade pattern is accelerating." Park studied the tactical displays from his command ship, one of the few vessels that could still transition between normal space and null space. The mathematics were brutal. Humanity was losing the fight. Each breach they sealed required human volunteers who could never return home. Each system they saved cost them people they couldn't spare. Back on Earth, the Council delegation had reached their decision. "We accept your terms," Velthun announced to President Han. "Full Council membership, human leadership of barrier operations, and unrestricted access to Council resources." "Excellent," Han replied. "Admiral Park will coordinate with your military forces. Dr. Choi will oversee technology integration. We'll need every ship you can provide, modified with our barrier interface systems." "There is one thing," the Zephyrian representative said hesitantly. "Our people cannot operate the modified technology. Their minds, they cannot process the contradictions required." "We know," Dr. Choi said gently. "Your species evolved beyond the kind of chaotic thinking the architect systems require. That's not a weakness. It's just a different kind of intelligence, but it means the barrier network will always need human operators." "Forever?" Velthun asked. "As long as the hungry dark exists beyond the barriers," Admiral Bay confirmed. "Which appears to be forever, yes." The full scope of humanity's sacrifice became clear over the following months. Young people volunteered for null space duty knowing they would never see their families again. Scientists gave up normal existence to study technologies that would gradually transform their minds beyond human comprehension. Military officers led fleets into battles against entities that existed outside the normal rules of space and time. Captain Kim Do-woon, now an old man serving as a border station commander, sent his final report to Earth from a monitoring post that existed simultaneously in 17 dimensions. His hair was white, his eyes held depths that spoke of seeing too much, and his hands shook from the strain of interfacing with architect controls for decades. "The barrier network is stable," he reported. "Breach incidents down 70%, from peak crisis levels. Council species colonies are reporting normal space-time conditions throughout their territories." He paused, looking out through his station's modified windows at stars that existed in colors no human eyes were meant to see. "The cost has been everything we feared, and more. We have ships and crews permanently stationed throughout null space, maintaining barriers that require constant attention. Our people have become something new. Not quite human anymore, not quite architect, but something in between that can guard the spaces where reality becomes optional." His final words were transmitted to every human colony, every council world, every species that sheltered in the galaxy's safe zones. They laughed when we wanted to join their council. They stopped laughing when the void screamed. Now they sleep safely while we stand watch in the dark. That's what humans do. We guard the gates so others can dream. Years passed. The council formally elected humanity to leadership positions, not out of gratitude but out of necessity. Human colonies spread throughout the galaxy, but many were established in null space regions where other species could not survive. Children were born who would never see normal stars, raised on stations that existed between dimensions. They learned to think in ways their parents never could, preparing to take over the eternal vigil when the current generation could no longer serve. The galaxy was safe, but safety came at a price that only humanity was willing to pay. In the end, they had earned something more valuable than council membership. They had earned the right to call themselves the guardians of all existence. And in the deepest parts of null space, where reality was whatever the guards decided it should be, human voices sang songs that kept the darkness at bay, one note at a time, forever.